And another guy that's in a contract year as well is Sammy Watkins. He did suffer a hamstring injury, which seems like a yearly thing for Sammy Watkins is to suffer an injury and go on the. I don't think he actually ever hit the injured reserve. I think stayed on the roster the whole time. He was the old Eric Berry day to day. So we got to see Sammy Watkins finally get back on the field, and he makes an impact. Like I mentioned earlier, we talked a little bit about his whole contract situation earlier, but I kind of want to dive into Sammy Watkins a little bit more. Do you think that he's going to be worth the price tag? And do you think he comes back for another year? Or do you think it's a multi-year deal?
The price tag for him is really interesting for me because first things first, I don't know. I'm not a draft guy at all. Like just not, I just lack the time and the brain capacity, but this year's receiver group, I've watched a few of them. Whew.
Yes.
Like I'm sitting here watching, I don't know his first name, but Waddle. And I'm sitting there like fanning myself,
man.
like,
Jalen, dude.
Yeah, I'm picturing him. And the thing is, what I'm reading is he could actually go like third or fourth among receivers because his own teammates probably better. And it's just like how Alabama didn't, well, that's a whole nother ball of wax. But I mean, those are probably, 2 and 3. You've got Chase out of LSU, and you've got a few other guys that look really good. Like it looks as good as this last year's draft class. And the thing is, a lot of teams took a receiver with this year's draft class, which means they're not going to be looking for a first or second round receiver again this year because teams still haven't quite caught up with that. I got to tell you that it's so good that's going to shrink the market. Remember, the Chiefs didn't think they were going to get back to Marcus Robinson last year. I know that. Not because I know things, but I know people who know things. They were surprised there wasn't a bigger market for him. And so they called him up. They're like, look, man, we like you. We can't offer you a big deal, but come on back. Let's win another ring. See if we can get you going. And that could happen again, only this time to Watkins, because it's not just the fact that you've got a great, great, great group of receivers coming out. And I mean, they might even be better. And honestly, if someone were like to put a gun to my head and say, you've got to pick one, but you can pick, like, I might be like, why don't we just put Jalen Waddle on the Chiefs and just watch, just Twitter alone during the draft. Like, you have any idea how many of the whole, they can't keep getting away with this gifts would be up there. Like, they can't keep doing this. It'd be great. But it's not just that. So I'm looking at, so one of my colleagues at The Athletic, Sheil makes a great list, the top 50 free agents. The number 2 and 3 are Chris Godwin and Kenny Golladay. Then you've got Allen Robinson, and you've got Juju Smith-Schuster, who may be playing himself out of a significant contract, but we'll see. He still has a ton of talent. So you've got those 4 guys alone, and then you might have a bit of a drop off in terms of some guys, but you also have Corey Davis hitting the market. You have Will Fuller, who, let me just tell you guys, just on a side note, if there's one player that maybe the Chiefs give a call to and say, hey, dude, if you can be healthy for 1 year here, you are going to get paid so much money.
Right.
That would be the guy to call, because Will Fuller in this offense would just shred.
Yes.
If he could stay healthy. So those are just some guys there. I mean, those are 6 players I've named there that have arguably put together better film than Watkins has this year. T.Y. Hilton's a free agent. Now he's a little longer in the tooth, but he can still play. I mean, you have guys listed. Sammy Watkins is listed at 34th. He's behind like 7 other receivers. He's had the injury issue. Long road to a short thought. I don't know if it's going to be super costly to keep him in Kansas City. And I think if they can bring him back for a reasonable deal, and this time reasonable means something very different. Like what they did this last year was reflective of how much more highly they view Sammy than maybe the fan base does. They think Sammy's an elite receiver. Has he shown that necessarily in Kansas City outside of a few games? Not really. The traits are there, and every now and then he looks uncoverable. But I mean, he hasn't been consistently elite. But I just don't think the Chiefs would have to pay that high a price to keep him. And if they can't, someone's going to end up on the outside looking in out of this receiver group. But I mean, like, would the Chiefs, let's say Sammy Watkins gets offered $8 million a year to play somewhere else. Should the Chiefs really match that? I don't think so.
No.
Because you can't tell me that out of Curtis Samuel, Sammy Watkins, T.Y. Hilton, Will Fuller. One of these guys is going to be on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
And would you be bummed or excited if they swapped out Watkins for Fuller? And at this point, I'd be kind of excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to be as expensive if he gets paid somewhere. And I'm saying this all before his inevitable 600 yards and 7 touchdowns during the playoffs. He'll probably play himself into a good deal there.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you're competing with, contract year Corey Davis. You're competing with some really, really good players. And you combine that with the drafts guys, you're talking about 10, 11 teams at least that can address their need without even calling Sammy.
Yeah.
At that point, it's bargain bin time. So that's where I think that's going to end up going. And if they can't get him for a bargain bin price, I don't think they should, because they've got other things to address, and you can draft receivers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything Seth said. And like, there are guys in the draft like Jalen Waddle. There's Rondale Moore from Purdue. Rashad Bateman, the guy from Minnesota, is a guy I like a lot. Tutu Atwell would be fun. He's a small guy. He's kind of reminds me of Hardman a little bit. And then Justin Ross from Clemson. Like, there's some talent. And that was the thing in the 2020 draft, where if the Chiefs didn't take a guy, that's okay, because they can do it next season. I still think that maybe a top 100 pick wouldn't hurt, but a lot of the Watkins situation depends on what they think of Hardman. And I think they've made it perfectly clear that they're in agreement with us that Hardman's not a future X receiver. He's never going to be a guy that fills Watkins' role. That's not Hardman's game. His routes aren't the same. He doesn't deal with press the same. He's a really, really fast guy, but that's not necessarily what you want in that role. So the Veach contract trigger also comes into play, like with the cap getting weird. Do you do an incentive-laden deal with Watkins again? But like Seth said, do you want to give him $6 million in base salary and then have it go up to like 10 or 12? I don't think that's what you want to do. And then there's also other free agents. There's T.Y. Hilton, there's Will Fuller, there's Corey Davis. And then the last thing is, I read like there was a Bleacher Report article on Watkins right when the season was getting ready to start, or a little bit before. And it was like a deep dive into the mind of Sammy Watkins. And like, he's a complex dude. He's hard to figure out. He's been a number one before in Buffalo. He knows what it's like to have all the attention on you and get the big bucks and get the 1,000 yards and all that stuff. He wants to be happy. He wants to be at peace. He wants to win. He wants his family to be happy. Like, there are several reasons for him to come back to Kansas City. And if that's not at a $9 million deal that can turn into 16, if it's at like a $5 million deal that can turn into 7 or something like that, then I think it makes more sense for both sides. But there's reasons for both sides to want to reunite for at least one more year.